Ron, do you have an idea of why people call you almost like a I don't know what the right term is, right wing, extremist, conservative, is it just because they don't want to face reality?
Probably. Um, I've got a bad name with the animal rightists, a very bad name with them,
Why do you have
and
a bad name with them? Let's explore that. Why do you have a bad name with them?
because um, their purpose is to convince the public of exactly the opposite thing that I want to convince them about.
And what is
So
that?
we're diametrically opposed. Um, I belong to an organization called, like here, TGA, the True Green Alliance. And its purpose in life is to create societies that understand the principles and practices of science-based wildlife management and that support the sustainable use of wild natural resources for the benefit of mankind. Um, that's basically what we're trying to do. So uh, when we get these guys, these animal rightists who are trying to tell us, for example, Cecil the lion, you must have heard about Cecil the lion.
Of course.
The Cecil the lion, start to finish, was one big lie. There was practically no truth in it at all. The guy who set it all up, who was the cause of it, had an animal rights organization just outside Harare in Zimbabwe, and he was looking for investments, and that's why he came up with that story. I actually wrote an article on it and poo-pooed everything. I was able to tell them that what he was trying to tell us about Cecil the lion was all bunkum, was nonsense.
Mm.
So basically, I am seen by a lot of these people as being the opposition to animal rightsism,
Well, why do you take the position you take, Ron?
because I believe in it.
Well, okay, but belief can be made of anything, right? I can believe that the sky is purple,
Okay.
and I can stand behind my conviction, and I can say, sky is purple, and I believe it.
Okay. I hope you feel good when you say that.
I do. And a lot of people say it, but so you say because you believe it. So why do you believe it so strongly, Ron?
I've I've grown up from being a little boy in the bush with a fishing rod in one hand and a .22 rifle in the other one from a very young age. And from there, I went into national parks where my job was elephant management and big game management, and, hunting crop raiding animals and man-eating animals and things like that. So um, I have been deeply embroiled in wildlife management in Africa since I was a little boy. And this is just the culmination. Where I am now, there are people in South Africa, for example, who support me because they know that I have got years and years and years of experience in this field. Um, so it's not everybody who doesn't like what I say, but there are a lot of them. Um, our friend Mr. Gonzalez, for example, who tried to convince the British government that they should stop trophy hunting out of Africa, he actually took films or photographs out of my books and put them on his propaganda to say that it was actually hunting elephants. And
Have you ever hunted an elephant, Ron Thomson?
a few, yes, in my life, yes.
No, I mean technically, have you ever truly hunted them, sport hunted an elephant?
No, not at
Exactly.
all.
Exactly. Well, before we go on, Ron Thomson, welcome to the Blood Origins podcast.
Thank you.
You are a stalwart in the wildlife management game. Um, I have the privilege, and I say it in the exact terms that I mean it, the distinct privilege to have met Mike Bromwich and think the world of Mike Bromwich. And don't hold that against me, okay? Uh, and I was fortunate enough to get his book, the Zim Parks Board book, in which you
Yes.
feature very strongly in it. And so I think it's imperative for us to, some of the audience, probably the vast majority of the audience, have no idea who Ron Thomson is. Obviously, have a little inkling now based on your intro to your standpoint, and sort of the little snippet of tantalizing information around the fact that you have shot elephants, but never hunted an elephant. Um, can you give us a little bit of your background, Ron? Like what you've done in your career to get to this point?
Wow. Um, I started off my adult career as a trainee pilot in the Royal Rhodesian Air Force. But then I tried to do aerobatics that the aircraft wasn't supposed to do, and I was very lucky to come out of a rolling hot accident situation. And I elected then the medic said that I had been subjected to so much G-forces in it, they didn't want to allow me to continue my flying career, but they were prepared to offer me a navigator's commission because the Royal Rhodesian Air Force was about to get itself some Canberra bombers, and they needed people like that in the Air Force as well as pilots. And I said, no, if I couldn't fly, then I wanted to have a new, completely different lifestyle for my future. And that was when I started hiring myself out to different companies. For example, a friend of mine, Mike Reynolds, was opening up a copper mine that had actually been mined by the ancients, the Sabaean Arabs here at about the time of Ophir, when King Solomon was still alive. They had mined for copper in this particular mine, and I had to help open it up. I blasted the road out through the hills and made it possible for Land Rovers to get down there. And I was also employed to hunt bushbuck and klipspringers and small buck like that for rations for the team of guys that I was working with. And I've always been involved with hunting, even if it's just hunting doves with a tutu, or fishing bass with a plug in the local farm dam. And I enjoy hunting. I enjoy going out and pitting my wits against nature. And as a consequence of that, following on from my work on the Shamrock copper mine, I when I didn't get a bushbuck or something to feed the people, we went fishing. And one of the things we did, because I was using dynamite at the time, and I know that is not very sporting. When you don't have anything to eat, dynamite gets you fish on the table.
Mm-hmm.
So we went down into the main pool on the Angwa River, and I chucked half a dozen rocks in that had sticks of dynamite tied to them, and these blew up and knocked the fish out. And then I went into the water to go with a bag and rocks in it and a bit of rope on the bag. And I went down to the bottom of the pool once all the dust had settled, and I picked up all the fish that were stunned were lying upside down on their backs, and you could see their white bellies quite easily. So I picked all these up and put them into the bag, rose to the top, pulled the rope. My black guys on the riverbank pulled them in there and then threw it back to me and went down again until I bumped into the crocodile. They told me, I said to them, come and help me collect these fish. And they said, no ways, there's a big crocodile lives in here. I said, but I shot a crocodile in this pool, or the next one up 10 days ago. That was the one that you had seen. They said, no, 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 there's another one. So anyway, I went down the second or third time I went down to the bottom, and the rocks pulled me down, of course, in the sack. And I bumped into the croc myself, and this thing came swirling out. It was also stunned from the explosions, but it smacked me across the rib cage and belly with its tail, and then shot off to the other side of the pool. And those black guys had a historical event happen before them, because I was the second person in 2,000 years who had run across the top of the water to get away from the crocodile. So that's how my career as a young adult started. And when that job was finished, when we got the road down and we got everything going, the United Kingdom Atomic Energy Authority were looking for someone who had my kind of experience in just that sort of thing, because they wanted someone to go and open up beryllium mines, because in atomic reactors, the crucibles in which they put the material, the radioactive material, used to release either protons or neutrons or one of these electrical currents, and that put a problem in the big machinery that was generating electricity. And they found that beryllium gave off neutrons, so there was no negative or positive electrical feedback on that. But before they converted all their atomic power stations to this new metal, they had to test it and see whether there was enough metal, enough of this stuff in Rhodesia at the time. So I then had to go and assess the quantities of beryllium in all these various mines that had been abandoned. And I was right out in the bush in various places. And one of the things that I did when I was still on the copper mine, I shot my first leopard, which gave my mother a great deal of pleasure to have a leopard skin that her big boy had shot on the back of her settee in the lounge. And when I moved out of that onto the UK Atomic Energy Authority business, I shot several other more leopards and an elephant out in the bush there. Now, I could have bought a license to shoot an elephant in a tsetse fly area, and this was a tsetse fly area, for £2 in those days, Rhodesian pounds.
Wow.
But I didn't bother to do that. I just went and I did what I wanted to do when I was hunting. And I was just
Ron,
like,
what does the system look like at this stage? How old are you at this stage? Let me ask this question. Mid-20s?
No, it was early 20s.
Early 20s?
Yeah.
And is the bush, are elephants prolific? Are elephants, like, if you saw one, that was a rarity?
No. In those days, yes, it was. Today, it's not. The elephant
So it was a rarity. It was a rarity to see elephants then.
Yes, definitely. And
why do you think that? Just before you why do you think it was a rarity to see elephants? You would think that, there was very few humans at the time, not few humans, but very much fewer population-wise from a human's perspective. Habitat was probably in its best shape possible. Was it a water thing? Why didn't we have a lot of elephants then?
Well, I was walking all around the bush all the time with my job, and I would have picked up their tracks, or I would have seen them often enough, but I didn't. Down on the copper mine, I saw one group of elephants, one herd of elephants way off in the distance. It numbered about 5 or 6. I saw one group of 3 where I was on the other mine in the second lot of stuff. And there, the elephants were coming in and going. They were going into adjacent Mozambique and then coming back again, and then coming up to where the native people had their villages and raiding their crops and things like that. So I know that I didn't see a lot. And later on, like right now, I've just done surveys in Kruger National Park and in right throughout Botswana, and I can assure you that Botswana has got over 200,000 elephants. Well, it's Botswana and the area around it that they have joined forces with for a Transfrontier National Park. They have got in Botswana itself about 130,000 elephants. If you look at the other countries around, which is in Namibia, Caprivi Strip, the western end of Zambia, the northeastern end of Zimbabwe up against Wankie National Park, the whole Chobe section in the Okavango swamps, that there, all of that area is full of elephants. We saw lots and lots of elephants and filmed them. That's what we were there for.
Yeah, sure.
In the days I'm talking about now, there were very few elephants.
Why do you think there were few elephants, Ron? Were they shot out? Were they so dispersed because of water? Do you have a hypothesis?
Yes, I can tell you where I think they went. The country was then opening up its cattle ranching. This was 1958, 59. And the country was opening up its areas for cattle ranching, and new farms were coming in all the time. So they had problems with tsetse flies and nagana, the disease that tsetse flies carry. And the government department in charge of tsetse department had actually gone out and they had tried to extinguish all the elephants in these areas where the farming was going to take place. So it wasn't just the elephants, they shot everything else as well. It was a real slaughter campaign. I had nothing to do with that, but that is what happened. I actually went through those bits of land after the hunting had stopped. And these were elephants that had run away from the hunting, from the government hunting, and then had returned in dribs and drabs at the end. So that was probably why, in fact, I'm almost positive that is the only reason why there were so few elephants about in those days.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So you shortly thereafter joined the Parks Board of Zim, right?
Yes, it was. That's quite right. Now, I went to a school called Plumtree School.
Yep.
South of Bulawayo. And
we just created a documentary about 40 kilometers south of Plumtree.
Okay. Yes, okay.
Yeah, we have have you met, I'm sure you have, I don't know the dad's name and the uncle's name, but Guavin Court Johnson?
No.
The Johnsons, the dad and the uncle, they were sort of raised in that area, 40K south of Plumtree. Anyway, doesn't matter. I'm just giving you some context.
Ramakwaban. Yes, No, I didn't know them. I knew a lot of other people. But every weekend when I was at school, every weekend I went out fishing or I went out hunting. I wasn't allowed to have a weapon at school, but that didn't stop us taking our weapons to school. And we had a cook matron who was very, very accommodating for us. Whatever we shot, we took it into her, or if we caught fish, we gutted them and took the scales off and took all the little fishes that we caught to her, and we used to cook them up, and there were 10 guys per table in the dining room, and everybody in our table got a hell of a lot more fish or a hell of a lot more duiker or ducks or guinea fowl and all these sorts of things, because we used to bring them in, and she used to take them as long as they were plucked and ready for cooking. She would cook them for us, which was great. But we weren't allowed to do that. But that's how I lived at Plumtree at school. And it was a great life, an absolute great life. Well, I had the prefects and I had my housemaster running after me like a Jack in the Box all the time. They knew I had a rifle. I must have had a rifle, but I kept saying, "Oh, but this was given to me by Mr. Reich
Oh, right.
or by the cattle inspector there, a guy called Niggly Wilson. When I shot a kudu, he used to come out with his car and pick it up and take it there, make the biltong, and then we got half the biltong and he got half the biltong. So that's how I grew up in school. And I also started falconry at school.
Hmm.
And it grew into something, a big thing in my life later on when I was in national parks. I actually became the primary coordinator for falconry for the Department of National Parks when I was in Salisbury and now Harare. And one year I went up and I caught. I loved these big eagles beautifully, but I was too small for them. I was never ever a very big guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just normal now, but I mean, when I was a young man, I didn't carry a lot of weight.
Yeah, yeah.
And I used to play rugby
It's
at school,
14 hours.
wing in the team. And it was just too light an effort. When I got nailed from behind by a big tough guy in the rugby team, they used to nail me good and proper. But I wanted a black eagle, just to give you some idea what we did. We had African hawk eagles, which we trained and caught guinea fowl with at school. But a black eagle is about the size of a golden eagle. They're huge. And at Marula, which is not far from Plumtree, from the south where you were, south of Plumtree, there was a black eagle's nest there. And I went up. The black eagle had laid one egg. They lay one or two eggs. And they had laid the one egg. And I went up with a long cord and put a noose on the nest all around. They put green leaves on the nest as a lining. So we put the noose all the way around, just under the green leaves, and then tied to a fig tree branch which was hanging down the one side. And then the other bit of the rope went up the other side. And when the black eagle came back, went in, and it moved up and went and settled down on its nest, I then pulled the rope around its legs, and I had myself a black eagle on the end of the line. Imagine what it is. A kid of, I don't know how old was I then? I must have been about 16, I suppose.
That's a different life right there, man. 16-year-old now trying to wrestle a mature black eagle.
And there I had this eagle, brought it back, and I put leather thongs on its legs like you normally do. And I tethered it to a big spike in a log at the back of the boarding house. And I tried to train it, and it was so heavy. I had to have a pole like a broomstick in my one hand, which had a T on the top of it that the eagle could sit on. And the leather thongs came down into my hand, but I couldn't carry it just with a hand like this.
Jeez.
It was far too heavy for me. It was huge. So I could go along by putting this stick on the ground like that. And after about a week of this, I realized I'd bitten off far more than I could chew. It was a massive undertaking. But this is the sort of thing I got up to. And anyway, what happened was that we, after school, we used to have to go down to the dining room where we had lunch. After lunch, we came back. Everybody then went and lay on their beds for half an hour. Then they went to do sports, or they did cadets or something like that they had to do in the afternoon. But you always had to lie down for a little while to have a bit of a rest, because those boys down there they were all over the place. and anyway, me and a friend of mine, a very good friend who was with me when I caught the eagle, he and I were lying there, and the next thing we heard this terrible screaming going on out at the back, and I knew what it was immediately. It was my housemaster's little golden cocker spaniel dog.
Oh my God.
What had happened is I'd come up from the dining room with a chunk of steak in my hand, and I put it on the log next to the black eagle for it to eat. and it just ignored it completely. Then I went back to lie on my bed, which was required of me. And then this dog came, the housemaster's dog came running by, sniff, sniff, sniff. It could smell the meat. So it went in to get the meat. And as its mouth opened to get the meat, this eagle had it. Two great big feet. I mean, the claw on this eagle's hind toe was 3.5 inches long, to give you some idea how big it was.
Did he kill the dog?
To this little dog. And Tim and I, from the top there, all the boys on the beds got to the dormitory, looked out the windows, and they could see what was going on. So Tim and I ran down to the bottom, and we grabbed this eagle, picked it up, and with number one toe and the back toe in my two hands, I opened the one claw and got that one free. Tim did the same with the other foot, and the little dog just dropped plop on the floor like this. And I said to him, Tim, have you got your penknife on you? And he says, yes. What are you going to do? I said, I'm going to cut these things off this eagle now. I'm going to let it go. I said, because if Tumpty Turner, who was the housemaster who owned that little dog, if he had known what had happened there, he would either have killed the eagle or he would have killed me, one or the other. These were his pride and joy. He had these two little bitches, and he used to go and breed with them and what have you. Anyway, I then got hold of the eagle and I threw it up in the air, and it went over this rubber hedge fence onto the road on the outside. So I ran around to go and see where it was going, and I looked down the road, and there, the whole school was at rest then. Everybody was on their beds, you must remember. And there was a common room down there under thatch that the prefects had, the prefects' common room. And in there, they could do what they liked virtually. It was a special little hidey-hole for all the prefects. And although you couldn't smoke in school, the prefects smoked in their place there. And they could have beers there. They had beers there and that sort of thing. Anyway, the headmaster had gone in there to see something in there. And as I went for this eagle, it took off and flew down the road with its wingtips beating patterns of dust on the road as we were going down, as it was going down the road. And out from the garden gate comes the headmaster, who was a portly little gentleman. And he stopped dead in the middle of the road, and his eyes grew like saucers as he saw this great big black eagle flying down the road directly at him. And he ducked at the last minute. It flew over the top of him, and then it went up, and it gathered height, and it went up into the sky, and it disappeared. So that's the main part of that story told. But that eagle laid another lot of eggs in the nest, and it reared babies in the same nest the same year. So
amazing! What an amazing childhood, man.
What happened then was we picked up the dog and took it into my study. We had studies at the back of the house, which were just lean-to rooms, and I shared this study with my friend Tim. And we had a bed in it and a table across the bed, and all our books. That's where we did all our prep work. Anyway, Mr. Tumpty Turner comes around and he starts shouting, Gina, Gina, has anybody seen Gina? So nobody had seen Gina at all, you see. And meanwhile, Gina's lying on my bed, half dead with big scars on it like this. And the other little dog came around and it sniffed at the bottom of our door, and I could see the shadow from the sun on the other side as the little dog was sniffing, and it must have smelt the other dog in the room. So I quickly jumped onto the bed, and I grabbed this little dog and I held its mouth shut so that it wouldn't whimper. And Tumpty Turner went and he knocked on the door outside and he says, has anybody seen Gina? No, they hadn't seen Gina. And eventually he went off, and I could hear him talking, asking everybody if they'd seen Gina, and they hadn't seen Gina. So I said to Tim, listen, we had cadets that afternoon where the army would come down and train all the schoolboys how to do square bashing, and would take us onto the range and we'd shoot with 303s and all sorts of things like that. Preparatory.
Mm-hmm.
You must remember, Rhodesian grew up with fighting the Ndebelés and the Mashonas and what have you. So all the schoolboys had to be trained. And Anyway, I said to Tim, listen, you'd better go off. Tell Tumpty that I've got diarrhea or something and I can't come this afternoon. Please just excuse me. Say anything you like. Just excuse me. I've got to try and get this dog alive now. Get it back to, because it was just lying there. It was dead. It was paralyzed.
Mm-hmm.
Which doesn't surprise me because those were huge feet. But anyway, he went off to do his cadets with Tumpty Turner. And Tumpty used to get dressed up in his khakis and his little Sam Brown and his officer's cap and his thing under his arm and what have you. He was really a little show off. And nobody liked him or respected him. But anyway, he pushed off and he came back again. And in the meantime, I'd gone up, got buckets of hot water and come and douse this dog in these buckets of water to get it right. And after Tumpty had come back again, he was still looking for Gina. He still didn't know Gina. So Tim came back and then he started helping me. And we finally got this dog so that it could stand up and it could walk around with stiff legs, you see. So we said, okay, well, we're winning slowly like that. Then what happened, we had to go down to the dining room and everybody got in a crocodile, two boys at a go, two rows of boys going all the way down to the dining room and where we had our supper. And then we'd come back and go into the prep room at the bottom where Tumpty would come and say a prayer for us, the evening prayer, and then tell us the news of the day. And he came up and he said to us, listen, you guys, I've got something very special to tell you. I said, you know, while you were down in the dining room, down having your supper tonight, a leopard came around the back of our house and it tried to catch Gina. Gina has been missing all day, but she was there. And she chased the leopard away. She's got big holes in her and all sorts of things
Oh
because this
my
leopard
God.
bit her. And he had to take her to the vet in Bulawayo, 60 miles away. The next day. And of course, all those things with the eagle's claws. But he's now telling this to the whole of the Lloyd house. There are about 60 boys sitting there in the prep room. And he's telling the story to them. And they're all looking at each other and they all know exactly what went on because they saw it. They're not just guessing. They saw the eagle with the dog. And after that, we had no more trouble with Tumpty Turner because after that lie, he was the laughing stock of the school.
Oh my
So
gosh.
that's what my days at Plumtree were like. I also managed to get some schooling done.
Well, you must have got some schooling done for you to be allowed to join the National Parks Board and do the things that you were doing, right? When did you join the National Parks Board? How old were you when you joined the National Parks Board?
I was 50. I was 1959.
1959. How long did you work for the National Parks Board, John? Ron?
25 years.
25 years. And you moved around Zimbabwe a lot, right? In your Parks Board days.
Well, not really. I spent 1 year in the Matopus National Park, which we stopped with game from Wankie. And it was my job there to reduce the numbers of elephants in the game park because the game park used to have a lot of game in it, the Matopus, but then it disappeared, probably hunted out. So we did ring fencing in there with paddocks, and we got game from Wankie, from giraffe, buffalo, zebra, wildebeest, everything. You imagine it came down. I had to go up to Ngama at Wankie, where we with the staff from main camp, we captured these game from a Land Rover. We stripped the Land Rovers down and we had long sticks with the cotton loops on the end of these things, lassos, but on a stick. And we were right up to them and we flicked this thing around their back legs and then pulled it up. Then we jumped out the vehicle, caught the animal by hand, took it back to a pen, kept them in the pens until we had a lorry load, and then I took them back to the Matopus and released them. And what we did was a lot of these animals, and they were just the right size for leopard breakfasts. So the leopards started climbing into them, and I was required to shoot the leopards because we couldn't go to all this trouble of getting the game down there only to feed the leopards. So I had a lot of experience doing that, and also shooting leopard for because they were stock killers.
Mm.
And then my big ambition was to go to Wankie, so I made it known that that was my ambition to go to Wankie. And I finally got there. After 11 months in the Metropus, I went to main camp. And I then spent three years there. And I then got married to the local school teacher. And I went down to Binga, which was on Lake Kariba. And I was there for 5 years. And while I was at Wankie, I did a lot of work with elephants. I hunted a lot of elephants in the Chilocho teak forests, when they were crop raiding. When I first went to main camp, it was in October 1989. 19, what did I say? It was 89.
89, right?
And at the full moon in October of every year, out of main camp, we used to put platforms on the trees over the water holes and then count the numbers of animals that came down to the water, largely to count the elephants, but everything from the size of a jackal up we counted. And we sat for 24 hours from midday on the one day to midday on the next day, right through the night. Full moon period. Yes?
We have less than a minute. So what I'm going to do is we're going to stop this right now, and then I'm going to send you a brand new link and we'll continue. Okay. I just wanted to get us a pause right there.
Let me get my administrator here.
Yeah, no problems. Hold on 2 seconds. I'm just going to stop recording.
We're there.
So you spend 24 hours counting game, essentially?
Yeah. The elephants would come underneath us. They were just poles that we put up like a platform.
Mm.
And we just chuck our valise up there with blankets on it, and we would lie there with binoculars, and we'd record every animal that came down to drink during the night.
And the purpose of this, Ron, was just to understand how much game was in the area?
Yes. The main thing was to find out what the elephant count was at the time. But we counted everything. And it went from midday to midday. And I must tell you, in the middle of the night with a full moon at that time of the year, you could see just as well in the light of the moon than you could in the light of the sun during the middle of the day. And we had people from the whole of the National Parks Board, all the senior guys. I mean, the guy who was chairman of the board was the Chief Justice of the country, Sir Hugh Beadle. And he was a great and mad on his elephant hunting. He loved his elephant hunting, and he loved game. He was in charge of the board, and he was there at the time, and lots of other people. The director of the museums was there. It was a big social event once a year when we did the elephant count, and we counted that year in Wankie a total of 3,500 elephants in Wankie at that time. And we had been busy.
What year is this, John? What year is this, Ron?
That was October 1960.
Okay.
Now, we had been, during the previous day, we had taken everybody in Land Rovers, everybody who allocated one or another person all the way around. We drove them all around the park, which is 5,000 square miles in area, by the way. And we showed them what the elephants were doing to the habitat. They were devastating. Certain trees, specialist trees that they liked, all the acacia trees were being hammered. The mukwa tree, which was a very good timber tree, was being flattened. There were more trees lying on their backs in the game reserve than there were trees standing upright.
This is 1960.
1960. And the number was as I said, 3,500 at that time. And now after after we'd come back and we handed all our papers and everything in, and the numbers had been tallied up, we were told how many elephants there were. So I know that there was 3,500 in the park as a whole. And the Chief Justice at the time, who was the chairman of the board that year, he wanted to know, it's all very well knowing that we've got 3,500 elephants in the park, but we've been around and we have seen the damage the trees have happened to the trees as a result of these elephants. There are too many elephants here. We must just understand it and we must accept it. We've got too many elephants in Wankie. Now, there are 3,500. What is the carrying capacity for Wankie? Nobody knew. So he said, well, what are we going to do about it? We can't, obviously we've got to do something. We've got to reduce the numbers of elephants. They are making a desert out of the game reserve. And this was thrashed about. And eventually the Chief Justice said, is there anybody here, Mr. Director of Museums, can you tell us? Chief Research Officer, can you tell us what is the carrying capacity of elephants for Wankie National Park? Nobody knew. He said, well, I can tell you now that 3,500 is too many because they're still pushing down the trees here. So I'm going to make a suggestion. I'm going to make a suggestion that we take 1,000 elephants off. So then we would then reduce it to 2,500 elephants in the park. Maybe that is the right number, but it was a guess. It was a total guess. But at least he had the gumption to make that judgment. And thereafter, whenever we went out shooting crop raiders, when they would go into the village gardens and eat all the local black people's mealies, their maize crops, whenever we were out doing that, we didn't spare the elephants. Whatever we saw, we shot, and we killed them and it was just up to two of us. There were two young game rangers at the time, me and another guy that I was also at school with, so he was a youngster too, Tim Braybrook. We were the only two who really got mixed up in this, and we were going out hunting elephants on a regular basis during the crop raiding season. And we were taking these elephants off. Whenever elephants were outside the park, we used to take them off because we had to reduce the numbers by 1,000 elephants. And so that was my first, I got to Wankie at the end of the year, and for the whole of the next year, getting these elephants out of the way was a prime objective of ours. So it was a big job for us.
Ron, let me ask this question. You know, you're at this time, and obviously you've obviously got an opinion right now on elephants. The mindset was not to wipe elephants out.
No, definitely not.
The mindset was we need to manage these elephants. And I'm going to use my own words now. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I want to hear or sort of get your reaction and response to this. My management philosophy on elephants is that they are habitat modifiers that are necessary. You need elephants to modify your habitats for all of the biodiversity that occurs in an African system. At too high of a density, they become habitat destroyers. That's where I sit.
Okay. Management is the action that I'm going to define it for you. Management is the action man takes to achieve a man-desired objective. There's nothing natural about wildlife management. We say we want to reduce the elephants from 3,500 to 2,500. Our management action for that year is to remove those 1,000 elephants. If we don't do that, we're going to end up with a desert. There's a thing called carrying capacity in wildlife, as there is in cattle. so
Right.
many cows per acre of land or something. The same in all our game reserves. We can say we have got a carrying capacity for elephants, a carrying capacity for buffaloes, etc., hippos, and so on. And that is measured against, it's measured scientifically against the impact that those animals have on the resources upon which they depend in the game reserve. If you could keep your animal populations, not just elephant, animal populations, if you can keep them at the carrying capacity, you would have no problems with wildlife management in any of our game reserves. It's when we allow the numbers to get more than the carrying capacity is the maximum number of animals that you can hold in a game reserve, you can carry in a game reserve in a particular area of habitat. The maximum number of animals that you can carry without those animals causing damage to the habitat. Damage being retarding it when it's dropping down, getting lower and lower and lower. Too many trees are being taken out, or too much grass is being eaten, or something like that, depending on the animal that you're talking about. So whatever the animal is, that application applies. The maximum number of animals that you can put in the habitats without those animals causing damage, permanent damage to the habitat. And here we had in Wankie, we had a situation. I knew nothing of that in those days. All this has evolved since I got into parks, because in those days nobody had even thought about culling anything. So 2,500 was the maximum number of elephants that Wankie National Park could carry permanently. That's what we assumed. We
right.
believed.
There was no science behind it.
It was a guess. It was a guess. But if we did the counts every year, we would know what was happening with the elephant population. But it was a guess, and it had to be a guess because something had to be done. So you're quite right in questioning that. It's not a question of we don't like culling elephants, we don't like killing elephants. That doesn't come into it. If it is necessary to do it, you do it.
Ron, do you believe that the exercise of culling elephants in those days was the appropriate thing to do?
Absolutely. But I'm not happy the way that it was done up till then.
What do you mean?
Well, what happened was we got a culling team going, and they were employed at main camp. In fact, they were at Sharpie camp up the road. They were employed there to look after the machinery and the buildings, and the carcasses had to be brought in. The meat was processed, the skins were processed, etc., and everything had to come in and go out. And there were guys who were in charge of the various aspects of the function of that station at Sharpie.
So that's an important point. You guys weren't just culling elephants and leaving them. It was you were absolutely utilizing the resource.
Everything, yes, 100%. Now, I personally, I've shot a lot of elephants, a hell of a lot of elephants, but I've never been on a culling operation ever. But what I actually led and designed a population reduction exercise in the Ghana in 71 and 72, in which we reduced the elephant population in the Ghana from 5,000 elephants to 2,500 elephants. And that wasn't done with ad hoc people, game rangers going in the morning and shooting them out, and that was your job for the day done. We were taking them out. We were taking out groups of elephants between 30 and 50 elephants, with 3 people shooting with R1 rifles. the military R1 self-loading rifles, we were taking out between 30 and 50 elephants in a time less than 60 seconds.
Hmm.
Can you believe that?
Ron, let me ask this, because I think a lot of people hearing this, you say it so blasé. No,
If
with
you
a no,
weren't,
go ahead.
if you weren't blasé, you could never have stomached it.
Hmm. No
You had to
emotions
have,
to you?
you cannot afford emotions.
Hmm.
Absolutely not. When you think of, when you get emotional about it, what you've got to think of is that the elephants in the Ghana Resort had damaged the game reserve down there was full of baobab trees. Now, some of these baobab trees grow to the age of 5,000 years. That means that they were 5,000 years old, or they were alive and growing when Tutankhamun was Pharaoh of Egypt.
Hmm.
And now along come these elephants, and they go in and they wipe these trees out. You'll get a herd of elephants coming around one tree, and day after day after day, they're just digging into it, and they dig it. So they ring it all the way around until the whole thing falls over and it's dead. And in 1 year, we had a research officer doing work on this. He determined that in 1 year's damage to the tree, to the baobab trees alone in the Ghana Resort, they had damaged to a lesser extent 23% of all the existing baobab trees, and they had damaged seriously 94% of the trees.
Hmm.
There were only 6% left undamaged by these elephants. So if you're a true naturalist, the baobab tree is an iconic species. It doesn't just grow willy-nilly here and there. It takes years and years and years to grow. So when we went in on this particular exercise, for example, every time we did any heavy shooting like that, we had to think of the baobab trees, and we said we cannot allow the Ghana Resort to exist without baobab trees. Well, it's almost like that stage now. It was terrible to see the damage that was being done. The riverine forest with all those beautiful big trees that you get growing along the African rivers, big ebonies. There was one big Cordaila africana, the wild mango tree, that had a canopy spread of 55 meters. And the elephants went in and just stripped it. Between the elephants and the porcupines, between the two of them, the elephants ate all the porcupines' food. They eat the same thing. So the porcupines said, well, I've got to eat something. So they went to all these big trees and they ring barked the trees right on the ground, up to about 1 foot 18 inches off the ground. They took all the bark off the trees and they ate them all the way around, and then they killed them. But that wouldn't have happened if the elephants hadn't destroyed the porcupine's food in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
This is where you're getting one thing to another. So what you've got to understand about these issues is that those of us who are involved in it, we're naturalists. The whole park was the thing that we were interested in. We wanted to maintain species diversity in the whole park. Everybody says, why do you think you make a national park? It's for tourism. Surely it's for tourism. It's not for tourism. The main purpose of a national park is to maintain the species of diversity of the plants and animals that live within the area of the national park. That's what it's there for. Tourism comes as a secondary issue. Now, if you've got your elephants knocking out all the baobab trees and all the big ebonies and all the riverine forest trees, these beautiful big evergreen trees, massive big trees, and the elephants come along and in one night they flatten it. You've got to put emotion aside and you've got to say the job has got to be done. And the people in charge up in head office had to say, listen, we're going to do this, that, and the other. That guy, and that guy are the guys that should go and do it because they're able to control their emotions on these things. It wasn't done willy-nilly. It wasn't done willy-nilly at all.
Mhm.
And
all used, right? Even in the Gonarezhou example, all the elephant was used.
I could show you photographs. I've got photographs in the books that I've written, where there are dead elephants lying everywhere. I've got one photograph which you won't believe. Every elephant was touching each other, and there were 47 in one heap, and they were all killed within less than 60 seconds, with 3 people going in to do the job.
Hmm.
If you couldn't do that, you shouldn't have had a job in national parks. Or if you wanted to have a job in national parks, it wasn't wildlife management that you should be doing.
Yep. Yep.
Does Mike Bromwich look to be the bloodthirsty type of guy that you're thinking
Absolutely
of?
not.
Right?
Absolutely not.
He's just as bad as the rest of us. Oh, just as good.
Just as good. Just as good. Ron, let me ask this. We've given a bit of your experience. Obviously, you've been in the elephant management, wildlife management game for a long time. Again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'll sort of maybe just plainly state the question. Where are we right now? We're 2024. Where are we when it comes to elephants in Southern Africa? I'll just call it Southern Africa.
We're totally overpopulated. I've just done a film. I made a film of the elephants of Kruger National Park, and they are. We were advised by the scientists at Skakuza, for example, that last in December 2021, that the numbers of elephants in Kruger National Park were 3,400.
No, 34,000. I was like, geez, if they're 3,000, somebody has gone in and done a monster cull.
34,000.
34,000. Yeah.
All right. Now, the numbers of trees in Kruger National Park, which were counted by the scientists in Kruger, after 1960, Kruger National Park has lost more than 95% of its top canopy trees to elephants. More than.
Mm-hmm.
That means there are no big trees left for martial eagles to build their nests, or for tawny eagles, or for ground hornbills to go into the holes. Nachapis and things like this, these little night apes, their habitat is gone. So now when we know that SANParks in South Africa was given the mandate by Parliament to look after the national parks in South Africa, and the mandate said, your principal duty is to maintain species diversity, nothing to do with elephants or buffaloes or any single species. To maintain species diversity, and that is what Kruger is there for. Now you've got a situation whereby all the big eagles, all the vultures, ground hornbills, all these birds are now facing imminent extinction because they're going to be unable to breed in the park because the elephants have removed all their big breeding trees. That's what we are faced with. Our job in national parks should be to maintain species diversity, and it's not. Nobody's doing it because the whole world says you can't shoot an elephant. Shame. How can you shoot an elephant? Such a beautiful, big, sentient animal. If you don't, you're not doing your job. If you don't do it when you have to do it, you're not doing your job. When you can say, right, me and my team are capable of going into these big groups and taking out between 30 and 50 elephants in less than 60 seconds, that's when you're doing your job. It's over and done with, finished and done with. You do your autopsies on all your bodies, you skin your animals, you collect the meat, you being it, you dry it out and make it fit for human consumption, and you reduce the numbers so that you are reducing the elephant herds down to the size of their carrying capacity, because that's your target. The target, Kruger culled elephants between 1967 and 1994 for 27 years.
Yeah, kept them at about
And
7,500 animals.
7,000 was their target.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that I spoke to Rocco Knoble, who was the director of parks at that time, when he came to Pilanesberg in South Africa, which I was in charge of at the time. And he and I sat down, and because I was interested in elephant management, I asked him about Kruger, and he told me everything about Kruger, the whole thing. Kruger elephants, everybody thought that the carrying capacity for elephants in Kruger was 7,000. That was nonsense. I worked out, and I can tell you how I've done it. In fact, in this little book here that I've written, I don't know if you've seen it.
No, I need to get it. Can I buy it here in the United States?
No, you can buy it here, but not in the United States. I'll have to send it to you. So you will have to keep in touch with me.
Well, what we can do is, yeah, I'll definitely stay in touch. It's called Elephant Conservation, is what you just said. You showed me on the screen, right?
Yeah, the facts and the fiction.
Okay. And what'd you work out?
And, well, here, if you look at it there, what do you see? You see, how do you do?
A water hole with no trees, lots of dung, with an elephant.
And a baby.
And a baby.
You see it?
Yeah, I see it.
Right. Now, what happened here, and this is happening in Botswana, it's happening everywhere where you're getting elephants, ultimately, when you start getting this kind of destruction to the habitat, is that the elephants in Chobe, in Botswana, for example, have to walk at the height of the dry season. They have to walk for 25 kilometers to find enough food to stay alive. And then they walk back again to get to the water, because there's no water 25 kilometers away. Now, what happens is the amount of energy that an elephant needs to walk from the water to where it gets its food and back again, the amount of energy that it gets from the food it eats is less than the energy it needs to get from the water to the food and back to the water again. So it would appear to have no answer to it. It's impossible to try that this can work out, but this is what happens. And what happens is that mother elephants they need the energy that they get from eating to do the walking distance. But they also need to make enough energy to produce milk to feed their babies.
Mm-hmm.
This baby here is still drinking milk. For 3 years, babies drink milk.
Mm-hmm.
And this female elephant here has got no milk in her teats at all. So that baby elephant had been wandering around without being fed from its mother's milk for God knows how long. And this is happening all over Southern Africa, all over. Wankie National Park was full of cow elephants running around on their own looking for their babies because their babies didn't have the strength to follow them.
So it's a pretty sad situation from your perspective. Somebody who, what you're articulating to me is quite, it's a little bit of a conundrum here, Ron Thomson, in that you're the individual who, without emotion, would go in and take out 60 elephants with not a blink of the eye. Yet you've just described something that you actually feel like is a sad situation. You've put emotion into it now, of an elephant and mother and baby put in a situation because there's too many elephants, and you're emotional about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then what happens is that mother turned around and ran back into the bush because she had to catch up with her herd. She had to go and get enough food to keep herself alive. And she left her baby. I shot this baby shortly after this picture was taken because it was finished. Now what happens to these little baby elephants? They spend their days wandering around the water holes. It's preferable to drink water and die than it would appear to be, than not get food and die. Because these little guys would drink the water and they'd walk around the water holes until a hyena or lion came along, boom, got him, and then they eat him.
Yeah.
So what you're getting over the years in Botswana, particularly in Botswana, there's been a tremendous amount of huge numbers of elephant calves being taken by hyenas and lions, to the extent now that although there is a pride of lions that do kill elephants, most elephants that are killed by hyenas and lions are little guys like this one here. And all over Botswana, over the years and years, baby elephants are being found dead and being eaten by lions and hyenas. And the tour guides at Kasane, when they get their tourists, they all when they go out in the morning, they're not looking on the ground, they're looking in the sky. They're looking for vultures, because the vulture tells them where the baby elephants are, and that's where they take their tourists there to see the lions or the hyenas eating the baby elephants. So it's become part of the tourist industry there to show. If you want to see a lion, go and see George, who's a courier, or he's a driver of such and such a little van where you can go and game view. He knows where the lions are. He saw them there yesterday. And what are they doing? They're eating the baby elephants.
So Ron,
it's chronic.
Ron, you're a practical guy. Where are we at right now? Like, what is there a solution? Are we beyond a solution? Are we just waiting for Mother Nature to do what she does best and knock out 30% of the population through disease or starvation?
No, that will leave open the opportunity for nature to do all sorts of other things that are not good for nature.
What do you mean?
You've got to get in there and solve the problem. Like elephants killing all the big trees in Kruger. If you could reduce the elephants, the trees would not be dead. The martial eagles and the badaliers would still have trees to breed in. So you mustn't stand back and say, well, we've got to let it happen. If you're going to manage the area, you manage it. Management is the action man takes to achieve a man-desired objective. Man-desired objective here is to stop the elephants from knocking out these big trees. Get it so that you can grow your big trees, rehabilitate the area, reseed this area so the trees grow back again. These are the things that the manager has to do. And you can't sit back and do nothing. You've got to take the bull by the horns and do something about it.
Well,
you must give me your email address. Not your email address would do. I want to send him some of the things I've been writing.
Yeah, please send me whatever you write on, send it via email to me, that you've got my email address, and we'll figure out a way to get the elephant conservation book to me. I'll actually be in South Africa next week. So, but let me finish this. Let me just say this and see what where you're at. But it's in my brain, and I'll get your thoughts on this. I've sort of switched my mindset a little bit. I'm still very much in the favor of obviously elephants being an integral part of the habitat. I think you're the same way. Habitat modification is incredibly important, up to a point. You do need what elephants do in habitat to maintain biodiversity, to maximize biodiversity. But I'm very much in the camp right now, especially in the Southern African countries, and I say Southern African very purposely, that the elephant narrative has moved from we need to save elephants to we have an elephant problem.
No, we don't have an elephant problem if you manage them properly. We don't have an elephant problem. We've got a human problem, because the humans are saying that the international tourists wouldn't like it if they came into Kruger and knew that we were culling elephants in Kruger. They won't like it. So therefore, the powers that be stand back and say, we're not going to cull elephants. But if they don't, they're messing up the whole situation.
Mm-hmm.
It really is very bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's man's attitude and man's decisions that are getting in the way of everything.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself.
I mean, these baobab trees at 5,000 years old. I mean, what can be more iconic than that? And when we went up, when you haven't seen our film on Kruger.
I have. I've seen all your pieces on YouTube.
Okay. Okay. Well, there you must have seen the numbers of baobab trees that were being hammered, one after the other, all together. That's chronic. What you're witnessing there is a short-term event that is going to have a long, long, long time eventuality. It's going to affect the habitat for that length of time. And if we lose our big eagles in Kruger, we've lost them forever, because there's no place where they can leave Kruger and go outside where the human environment is and build their nest there and breed there and then come back at some time in the future. That's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Can't do that. First of all, the nest will be pulled out by our local people out there. They see the martial eagle as being an eagle that will come and catch their lambs, so they'll kill it or they'll knock the nest out of the tree. That is just a primitive perspective, but we cannot afford to have the martial eagle and the other big eagles in Kruger even think about shifting where they're going to live for the next 5,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be in Kruger. That's where their habitat is. That's where their food is. That's where everything that they need is. So it's a very difficult, to me, this is one of the most difficult problems we have to solve. Is what are we going to do with all these big, majestic big birds that are being killed off by the elephants because they're knocking over all their trees?
Mm. Yeah, certainly a classic example of a sort of a trophic cascade and unintended consequences of an animal being disproportionate in its population on the landscape.
Yeah.
Well, Ron Thomson, I appreciate you. I appreciate the time. I know it's taken us quite some time to connect on this, and I really appreciated the opportunity this morning. I really valued the time that you've given me. And I look forward to, please use my email as you see fit in terms of sending me information. And I'm sure a lot of people that have listened to this are just like, wow, this is, you're of that generation of the 60s, 70s, and 80s where wildlife management was unaffected by animal rights and the sort of extremist viewpoint, and it was more practical and said, look, this is what we need to do, to your point, which is what is the ultimate purpose of a national park, which is to maintain and protect and sustain biodiversity first and foremost. So thank you so much, my friend.
Not at all. And thanks to Elma. Otherwise,
Yes.
we wouldn't have been together.
Our technologically advanced assistant. Thank you.
Right.
Ex-music teacher.
There we go.
Yeah.